Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Here Be Dragons. I am your host, Stephen Stark. Joining me, as always, Nessie, the Questing Beast, John from John Webster Film, Unspun Yarn, that's her. And today we're doing something a little bit different from what we normally do. We do a lot of looking at specific stories and breaking down those stories or characters in those stories. But today we're taking a kind of a macro view and looking at just heroes in general. What does it mean? How has the idea evolved over time? What can we learn from studying the tropes associated with one culture and time period versus another? Anyway, I'm just hoping that it's a little bit more cerebral than we're used to doing. Hopefully we come off as not being too dumb. Oh yes, I'm already seeing some love for my Rocinante shirt. I love it. I didn't have an Expanse shirt, and it's become one of my favorite shows. So yeah, I'm happy to be repping my my Rocy love. So Nessie, John, how prepared are you for this?
Nessie?
Right, that's what I thought.
No, I actually watched some videos this morning discussing heroes and did a little bit of reading, but still probably not it. I mean, I'm just ready to talk. Some of the stories I love and the heroes who have inspired me. I'm wearing a shirt today featuring the original Star Wars trilogy heroes. And I know going back to my childhood, especially Luke Skywalker was the very definition of a hero for me.
You and I have that in common. Like to this day, he is the quintessential hero to me. But so when I started looking into this, the first thing I did was look up the definition of hero. Like, what is the definition? And I've got it right here, so I'm just going to read it real quick. The definition of a hero: a mythical or legendary figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability, an illustrious warrior, a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, or one who shows great courage. And I feel like you can actually see how our society views a hero versus how ancient societies viewed hero, what it meant to be a hero, just in the way those definitions are sort of related, but slightly different. The oldest one referring to mythological people, the next oldest just being really powerful warriors, which then becomes conflated with the idea of nobility as sort of chivalric ideals come into vogue. And then finally, to be someone who shows great courage, which the person that runs into a burning building to pull a kid out, that's a hero, right? We all agree that that's a hero. Just not, but at least in our modern parlance, it is what we would use.
Right. Yeah, so is a hero defined by his qualities or by his actions? So that's, you're talking about these traits that, these classical heroes like we speak of in mythology, like Hercules, like Theseus, like Jason. These are quote unquote classic heroes from the mythology, or someone like, Gilgamesh. They're all tied in these ancient tropes. But then a modern day hero would be like a firefighter, like you say, who just runs and, goes into a burning building and puts, the needs of others in front of themselves, that they give of themselves and they sacrifice of themselves. And they could just be Joe the rag guy or Susie down the street, I
actually want to address Amy's comment here. We are going to use hero as a gender neutral term today. We will, the word heroine exists. It actually has a different connotation a lot of times than what we're discussing. When we talk about heroes, we could be talking about,
it's a mixed bag
as a gender neutral term. So yes, if we say hero and we say he, forgive us for genderizing a little bit too much. We don't actually intend that. So, let's say that off the top. Please continue, Nessie, with what you were saying.
Well, an everyday hero. That's like another type of hero. Just it's more humanized, more relatable. It could be anyone. It's everyone has like a moment where they can be heroic or achieve a type of heroism, and it's just the taking the act, the will, the crossing the line to do such a thing, to put the needs of others first.
And I think when we talk about the older conception of a hero, we tend to think of them as larger than life figures who are wholly heroic. But then when you get into the more modern view of a hero, I even question as to whether there are pure heroes in a modern sense, because you have people who can do very heroic acts who themselves are not necessarily people who are, you get into sort of the Game of Thrones territory where you can have despicable people who may yet do heroic acts when called upon. So it gets murkier as I think we enter modern times, but that's sort of our entertainment too, where we like anti-heroes.
And we'll get into anti-heroes and like all the permutations eventually, because I think our modern society really loves a good anti-hero, to the point where we feel like there is a definition of hero that's almost boring to watch to some people because they're a goody-goody or whatever.
Yeah, but as a self-confessed goody-goody, I like a good old-fashioned hero.
Oh, and I do too. Like, I mean, it's a permutation of a hero as a superhero, but it still applies. You've got people who like Captain America or Wonder Woman who are incredibly idealistic, morally upright, willing to bend the rules if they need to in the pursuit of what they feel is justice, but like their motivations are very pure.
Yeah, I would consider them true heroes. But then there's certainly, you have a crop of Marvel characters who are very clearly anti-heroes. I think these days sort of the biggest example of that is oh god, why am I blanking? Deadpool.
Mm-hmm.
Who is definitely not a hero.
No. He is perhaps one of the greatest definitions of the anti-hero. But like, as I was looking into this topic more and more, like the progression in literature from hero to anti-hero is actually really deeply interesting. Because it didn't happen overnight. But like, so the generally, and again, I don't claim to be an expert. We're just smart people who like to read stories. So please forgive us if we get get some of my facts out of whack. But I think it is generally accepted that the hero trope evolved in the late 1700s into the romantic hero, which was different than the previous iteration because previous to that, heroes were sort of like the pinnacle of what a society thought was desirable. This person is a great warrior, and by the skill of their arm, they have great honor and glory to their family and to their nation and to their king, all of that stuff. With the rise of the romantic hero, you get a hero that rejects social norms and conventions and is in return rejected by the society around them. And that is a central theme of the romantic hero. And romantic being the sort of like talking about the romantic movement in art, not sort of like romance and love and all of that, which then sort of over time morphed into what is known as the Byronic hero, which is still a protagonist. And a Byronic hero is sort of a subset of the romantic hero, but he is often the source of his own downfall as well. His or her. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best. Nessie,
Oh.
where'd you go? What, did you just want to be on the bottom? Okay. Well, you can stay there now.
Anyways, I'll be right here.
Okay, cool. Well, you are the foundation upon which John and I will stand.
As it should be.
Right.
As it always is.
So, but to me, like, the first, the probably oldest literary example of the Byronic hero is Dr. Frankenstein. He rejects the norms of society. He is rejected by society to do those things that he wants to do. But he is, in the end, the source of his own destruction because of the way he rejects his creation, the monster. Which, yes, Frankenstein is the doctor, not the monster.
But that's interesting. Why do we regard Dr. Frankenstein as a hero?
Because he is the protagonist of the story.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily think that being a protagonist is enough to qualify yourself as a hero.
But that's why he is a Byronic hero.
It's very specific.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's a very specific archetype. I mean, trust me when I tell you that he is, in fact, a Byronic hero. He was referenced so many times in my research as kind of the archetype.
I guess then
you know what we're all about. Speaking of, we should say hi to everybody who's here so that John can forget his rebuttal and I will seem correct.
I never forget.
Oh, yeah, I believe you, but it was worth a shot. But anyway, I do want to say hi to everyone. Hello to Amy Blackfire. Amy, we love you. Your stuff that you've got put out recently for your mythology videos about Chinese mythology as it relates to Game of Thrones. Great stuff. Go check out Amy's channel. I see Jess Britfeck. I see Aaron M. Apparently Human, a.k.a. Cat. How you doing? Wheezy Squeezebox in the house. Wheezy, official timekeeper. She will let you know in 6 minutes when it's time to smoke. I promise she will. Lady Leaf Underhill. Sixto Sounds. Mom is in the house. That's Betsy, mother of Starks, my IRL mom. Our Liz Kopic. Hey, Liz, I haven't seen you in a little while. How you doing? All right. I'm going to attempt this name. Wish me luck. I believe. Oh, I see you've written Poland right there in your latest comment. Agnieszka Janika Struska. Welcome to Here Be Dragons. It's nice always nice to see a new face.
Stephen, even if that's not right, that's a damn good attempt. I wouldn't have been able to pull that off.
I hope I at least got kind of close. Agnieszka. See, that's close to what I got. But ridiculous Ed Tollett in the house too. I see you. I saw other people earlier. Stephanie Frederick, Flores the Fox, Danger. Everybody staying clear of the moon door. There was somebody else I saw. Milo Gentry. I know I saw Mandy earlier. Mandolin 523. So Cedric, hey, how you doing, my man? It's good to see you. Welcome back. Isabel Harper. Yeah, okay, that's everybody. I think if I missed you, I apologize. I will try to get you the next time I notice. But thank you all for joining us. So let's get back to Hero Talk. Nessie, I believe you were about to agree with me completely.
About the Byronic hero and how it's the architect of their own destruction. They're out of hubris and, their own conceit. Yeah, I agree, 100%.
I mean, I guess it all comes down to your definition of a hero. As I don't think that, personally speaking, I don't think merely being the protagonist of a story equals to being a hero. But I'm not going to argue with if you found several examples of Frankenstein being described as that type of hero.
Right. Well, and again, like, this is why when you say what is a hero, it's not actually an easy question to answer, because sometimes it is conflated with protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And protagonist just is the person who's driving the story at that particular, driving the the plot arc. Doesn't necessarily have to be good, bad, or what have you. Like in the when Tyrion is the in King's Landing, he is the protagonist of that particular part of the story. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's a good person or he's doing good things. He's just the person who's driving the plot.
Agnieszka, I hope I'm close. Please do that. I will share it with everyone so we can actually say your name correctly. Polish is not the easiest language for we Americans to pronounce, but I try. Also, Magna Mater 2 had a really great comment that, Nessie, you are the goddess in Joseph Campbell's hero cycle.
Oh.
You are the one that leads us in our journey through the underworld. That is why you are down there.
I'm in the underworld.
For us. And that's a very good point, Sean, that we're all the heroes of our own story, which is why we conflate the word hero with protagonist a lot of times, I think. But it's also because a lot of times the protagonist of a story is a hero. I can see that. He is a protagonist who is not a hero. Yeah, he's not even an anti-hero.
No.
Or a romantic hero.
But once again, I think he probably views himself as the hero of his own story.
Probably does.
Definitely, he is the hero of his own story.
Right. And then the anti-hero sort of grows out of the Byronic hero idea. And then the anti-hero has sort of come and gone in and out of vogue since it first rose to prominence probably in the 1950s. But, you know, and as time has marched on, it has gone in and out of style again and again. Like even in my lifetime, you know, that there was a time for anti-heroes and then they kind of went away and then they came back. I think of Christopher Nolan's Batman as maybe the quintessential anti-hero. Well, maybe not the quintessential, but as a really strong example of an anti-hero. Because he... Well, maybe not, because part of the definition of an anti-hero is that they lack the qualities of like idealism and a strong moral compass to guide them. And maybe Batman is more of a romantic hero in that way.
I think that specifically in the case of Christopher Nolan's Batman, I do think he dips into anti-hero simply because he comes to a point where he's willing to maybe get his hands, you know, a little dirty in terms of they touch on this in The Dark Knight where he's, you know, developing like surveillance technology and stuff. He's doing things that are a little morally questionable, but then he comes back from it. So I do think he lands more on the side of hero than anti-hero, even though ironically that movie ends with Gordon saying, you know, because he's not a hero, you know, he's a silent guardian, a watchful protector. But I think that he does have a lot of the qualities of being a hero.
Mm-hmm. I do too. And that's part of probably what makes him one of the most popular characters from the DC universe is the fact that you can have this nuanced discussion about how far is too far and like which side does Batman fall on? Because we all acknowledge that he's a hero, but sometimes we're just like, that's kind of far, man. Like, you know,
he's pretty dark.
Yeah,
he is the Dark Knight, so he just treads that line between good. I mean, the heroic and the not so great gray acts. He really is more of a very gray character.
Okay. So Anna's saying she would call Batman a Byronic hero. And again, I don't claim to be the super expert, but to me, a Byronic hero has to be the architect of their own downfall. They have to, their own shortcomings have to be the source of their destruction. Because Byronic heroes, part of the trope is that they always meet a bad end. So that would be my argument against that idea. Okay, how about Dexter? How would you classify Dexter? Dexter is an anti-hero.
Yeah, anti-hero, definitely.
Sociopath.
Well, yeah, but
when sociopaths are your hero, yeah, I'd say we have to go with anti-hero on that one.
Well, it's because he is ridding society of bad people, but he's not. But he's not doing it for virtuous reasons, or at least,
right.
He's
a serial killer with a heart of gold.
Yeah.
No, I understand he's channeling his destruction into acts that he thinks are beneficial towards society. Getting rid of bad people.
I like that, Peter. The fact that he had a code, that probably figures into a lot of what makes a good hero or anti-hero. The fact that, they go beyond what we might consider civilized, but they do it for the right reason, or that they won't go outside of certain parameters because they have a code. Agnieszka asks, how would you classify Geralt of Rivia? So Geralt he's got some genuine hero because he's got some reluctant hero to him, which is a trope we haven't even talked about yet. I think he's got some Byronic hero because he is the source of some of his own downfall. He's definitely got some anti-hero in him. I don't know that he clearly falls into one category.
Yeah, and that's honestly the way a lot of modern characters, are. It's hard to pin them down as one thing or another. They kind of go on a journey through different categories. I was going to mention, your favorite Marvel character, Stephen, who's Tony Stark, who very much, I feel, goes between sort of anti-hero to even areas of, you could say, villainy at certain points. I think when you get into the Ultron stuff, you could make that argument. Before eventually, I do feel that by the end of Endgame, he's achieved hero status, genuine hero status. So,
but he's got a lot of self-destruction along the way that makes him that sort of romantic or Byronic hero. Ed asks, would I consider Ned a Byronic hero? It was kind of his fault he died for being too noble. Okay, but my argument against Ned being a Byronic hero is that a Byronic hero is kind of an extension of a romantic hero, or a subtype of a romantic hero. And part of what makes a romantic hero is that they reject social norms and are rejected by society in turn.
Yeah, no, I think Ned is a hero in a story that doesn't have a whole lot of room for heroes.
Yeah, and I saw somebody disagree that they would even say that Ned was a hero, but,
I guess Brian maybe is more of a reluctant hero.
Yes.
Because he never really wanted to be involved in what he eventually became involved in. Any politics. He was a family guy. He loved his family. He was perfectly content to stay at Winterfell and keep his secrets and keep his silence and keep to himself. He had never really had any aspirations of, politics or advancement, and he kind of had to reluctantly go.
Right. And real talk, the reluctant hero is probably one of my favorite tropes. You can look at somebody like Han Solo is a reluctant hero. He doesn't want to be the good guy. But like by the end, he comes around just enough to do that one thing that was needed. He's not really the hero of the story in general. That's arguably Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia. Han is just there. He's there in the right moment at the right time, and he probably becomes less reluctant as sort of the story progresses. But even when we get back to him in The Force Awakens, he's reluctant again. So,
not even think that he arrives at I'm being reluctant here. I think in the original Star Wars, he's even an anti-hero in a lot of ways, especially if we're talking the pre-sanitized version where he's willing to, shoot first. I think by the time the trilogy wraps up, and especially once we come around to The Force Awakens, he's very much the reluctant hero type.
Right.
Yep.
Well, hey, our chat is keeping it lit. They're bringing up some great people.
I was actually thinking about Beatrix, and I couldn't figure out whether I felt that she was an anti-hero or a hero. What would you guys think about that?
She is not a hero, I would say. She is a bad person in general.
Yeah, that's true. I'm very much always focused on her sort of how she's been wrong, but you're right. She has done a lot of bad things.
Right. Yeah, so but in the terms of the story, I feel like she is, she's certainly got the anti-hero vibe, but maybe we can classify her as Byronic because all the problems she faces are because she joined this freaking, what is it, Fox Force 5, or I know that's not what it's actually called. That's a different Tarantino movie altogether, but you know what I mean, the Sand Snakes or whatever they were called. I don't really remember.
The Deadly Viper Assassination Squad, I think.
Right. Agnieszka, we will be getting to Lord of the Rings specifically, probably in hour 2, because I think that is one of those stories that is just so juicy. We're going to have to pick it apart. It's John's favorite.
Yes, my favorite. Everything.
A lot to go over because there are a lot of different hero things to talk about,
and with Aragorn especially, but we'll get to that.
And Sasa, you're welcome for getting "I Need a Hero" stuck in your head. This is just another free service that we provide.
Amy brings up Magneto.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Magneto and Professor X, because that's a dichotomy, a hero-villain dichotomy, but I think they're actually both anti-heroes in their own way.
Yeah, well, and it depends on which sort of version of the story we're talking about, because I think, having grown up on the X-Men films as well as when I was little, the animated series, I would have been much more inclined to call Professor Xavier a hero. But as you dive into the comics, you realize that he's much more of an anti-hero, and he and Magneto are very similar in that regard, even more so than, in any adaptation, they're shown to be sort of, two sides of the same coin, but especially when in the comics you get a much more morally ambiguous Professor Xavier, it's just, I think it's much more interesting just seeing as how they both have, their ideals, and even Professor X, who has, I think, good his overall motive is good, but just the way he goes about things are sketchy.
Yeah, but that kind of makes him an anti-hero.
Yeah.
because he's like compromising morality for what he sees as the greater good, which is like one sort of one side of that coin. The other being the person that does good things despite lacking idealism or morality. And I think both types are interesting. For those of you who are fans of spaghetti westerns, Clint Eastwood in the Dollars trilogy is an anti-hero.
Very much.
Like, he is helping people, but he is doing it because he's paid to do so. He is not a good person. He is doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. And, like, he's one of the most compelling characters from that sort of genre and time period. Yeah. Gosh, you guys, I can't even keep up. You're bringing up so many great people. Anna says Holden is a hero. Amos is an anti-hero. If you want to get very reductive, that's correct. I think there's a little more nuance to both of them than that. But like in broad strokes, that's probably pretty accurate. Imperator Furiosa is a reluctant hero, but Max is an anti-hero. More reluctant hero in Fury Road, right?
But also, we don't know the stuff that Furiosa has done in her. There's a lot of things we haven't seen, but within the context of the story, yeah, I think she's, it fits the mold of hero.
Right.
And a damn good one. I have yet to do a stream on Mad Max Fury Road, but I would love to do
that. Okay. Yeah, actually, I look forward to that one. That movie is bonkers. I lost my train of thought. My apologies. The chat has been going so quickly, and everybody's been saying such great stuff that I lost my train of thought. So let's discuss the reluctant hero a little bit more closely, because you can say Han Solo is a reluctant hero, or Shrek is a reluctant hero, but like you can have reluctant heroes that are much more heroic than they are, because Shrek and Han Solo, while reluctant heroes, are also more anti-hero. You can have a reluctant hero who just breaks down and has that "I don't want this responsibility" type of thing. Frodo goes through some of that in his journey to Mount Doom. If you, even just from the movies, you got that moment. I wish the ring had never come to me.
Yeah, he's very much the definition of, and a lot of people. I remember when the movies were out, because I know Frodo has in the books maybe a few more moments of sort of outward, bravery and heroism, like at the Ford of Brunnen, when he actually holds up his sword and and cries out to the ring wraiths, and so it's kind of a strong moment for him. But I do think that the films capture him as do a good job at capturing him as a reluctant hero by showing sort of that quiet determinism. He's willing to take this on, but he doesn't revel in it. He doesn't necessarily want to do it, but he knows that he has to. And I think I like that to see that version of a hero in a story like that, where that's your central protagonist.
Well, it almost makes them more relatable, because when you have a character, part of being a hero is that you're facing really incredible odds. And when you have someone who is facing those type of odds, but then they're like, oh gosh, this is so insurmountable. That's how we're feeling as viewers. So I feel like it makes them more relatable. Anna's got a really great question. What if the character is represented like a hero, but the system he or she represents is fascist, like Judge Dredd or Johnny Rico from Starship Troopers? That's a very deep question, and actually, Starship Troopers is one of those movies that I want to cover because I think it's one of the most misunderstood sci-fi movies of all time.
Yeah, we should do a retro on that.
And I actually haven't. I've seen it once, I think, and it was quite a long time ago. So I'd be interested in revisiting that.
Yeah, that was a movie that went over my head the first time I saw it. And somewhere maybe like the third or fourth time I saw it, I went, oh, we're the bad guys. Yeah. And I changed my whole perception. So, yeah, I don't know how to comment about that exactly, Anna. Like, how would I classify them? But, like, I guess I would say they're heroes by the definition of the society in which they live.
Right. Like, Barristan Selmy is considered a hero in Westeros. And
he's a killer.
He's a killer. And his greatest act of heroism that, put him on the map was when he rescued King Aerys from Duskendale. His greatest act, but it was also like he has regrets over, performing that. Did he do the kingdom any favors? So he's considered a hero.
And that's interesting, that whole topic of, killing is, the act that, brings you the mark of heroism. But what did Jaime do? He killed Ares for the greater good, but because he broke his knightly code, he's branded as a villain, and then that in turn shapes him from that point on. And so, yeah, it's just
yeah, and Selmy rescued the king, but he was responsible for a whole town and being a whole genocide. Just wiped out.
I do want to address a couple of the comments before they go too far. Magna Mater says every hero has the stage of refusing the call and fighting doubt. That is true. That is part of like Joseph Campbell's monomyth. But there are also heroes who never fully overcome their desire to refuse the call. Maybe they do refuse the call, but they don't embrace their sort of like hero destiny along the way. And I saw another one from Agnieszka. Do you see Katniss as a reluctant hero? Full disclosure, I have not read any of the books, and I have only seen the first movie. But in that movie, I would, yes, classify her as a reluctant hero. The whole way through, she wants nothing to do with it. She is simply fighting to survive and trying to maintain her ideals and morality through that, which is pretty
very
tough.
Difficult.
Yeah, I mean, just I've read all the books and seen all the films, and I'd almost regard her as a textbook reluctant hero. I mean, through and through. By which, she fits that criteria. Not that I think that she's a standard written character. I love the character. I think Katniss is great, but just in terms of she wants nothing to do with any of that. Her motives starting off are very selfish, and in terms of not necessarily being a bad thing, she wants to protect her sister. So that's her immediate focus, not leading a revolution or anything like that.
Yeah. So, Aaron, just the Nessie, the comment that you just posted from Aaron, and then Amy's reply to that.
Yeah.
There's an interesting conversation going on in the chat right now about how reluctant heroes are always white men. Like, our heroes have expanded to include a lot of people, but like the idea that the reluctant hero is rejecting power, that meaning that they have the power to reject that power. Right. They have power to reject. It's an interesting conversation to be had about privilege, for sure.
I mean, I don't know. Finn is a reluctant hero.
He is. And like, I'm sure Amy's not saying always never, but like it is rarer for sure.
Yeah, you're right.
That's a new addition.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a little bit of diversity.
But well, and I think that's sort of, and that's not just with reluctant heroes, but that's heroes, period. It's like, obviously there's has not been enough diversity overall in heroes or even characters at all throughout history. So, yeah, once you start to balance it out, then we will get more reluctant heroes as well. So.
Right. And I can't wait to see it. But yeah, there is something to be said there about the idea of rejecting power because you come from a place where you can reject it. Women and minorities tend to have to fight for power. They're not in a position to reject power because they don't have power to begin with, the same way a white man does. It's an interesting idea, Amy. Thanks for bringing that up. And Aaron, you too. I know that was conversation you two were having. See, this is what makes Here Be Dragons great. Not us. I mean, we're all right, but it's those folks down there in the chat section. You guys.
Well, and Nessie.
Awesome. Well, and Nessie, right?
Yeah. So, what do you guys think about Yennefer and Yennefer's character? Is Yennefer a hero? Is she an anti-hero?
Yennefer is a Byronic hero. She is the source of her own destruction. And she has rejected the society in which she lives, and is in turn rejected by it. And it is her own desires that are leading her to what I think will ultimately be her. I don't see a good end for Yennefer if she continues to hold the mindset that she does.
Right. But like other characters in other stories, and Geralt, he has played several different types of hero roles. Yennefer's character could evolve to, a more the reluctant hero, or a classic hero. It all depends. Her last act, we saw she was pretty much sacrificing herself for her.
But see, that is almost like a definitively heroic act.
Right.
So, because Jess says she would not call Yennefer a hero at all.
Yeah, at this stage,
an anti-hero.
At this stage, I'd say more anti-hero, but it's also hard because, we've only had one season of the show, and I don't know her story from the books or anything. So based on the season that we've gotten, I'd say anti-hero, but she could still have a very long journey ahead of her that changes my perspective on that.
Yes, and Agnieszka, full disclosure, I know you're loving our Witcher discussion. I've only seen one season of the show and I haven't read any of the books, so this is based off of one season of a television show.
Right, which we're looking forward to season 2.
Yes, I very much am. I like The Witcher a good deal. So let's talk about Holden and Amos, because it did get brought up briefly. Holden is kind of a more traditional hero character, whereas
bringing the whole way.
Right.
Yeah, definitely reluctant hero. But yeah, I would label him as a hero, and it's an important distinction that I want to make because Holden certainly has flaws up the wazoo, but if that makes him a flawed hero, that doesn't make him an anti-hero.
Right.
Yeah.
Because Holden is always he tries to be morally upright in everything he does.
Yeah.
Which makes him a bit of a Boy Scout sometimes and makes people roll their eyes at him, myself included. He's the captain of the Rocinante, which has a crew of 4, and he's probably like my number 8 or 9 favorite character on that show,
I mean, talk about white boy privilege. I mean, he gets the privilege to say, "Oh, I don't want to get involved," or "We're going to get involved," or "It's not my fight. It's not our fight." When there are other people on the crew that are, very much have a stake in,
Yeah, but to be fair, he has to, he assumes at first that he is, do that sort of, place, and which is why he gets sort of taken down from that where everybody's like, yeah, we're more cool with Naomi, 20 shots, but then he has to sort of earn his place to where then they, he earns sort of their respect, and so he arrives back at that place of leadership. It's not like he just automatically gets it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then
I mean, go ahead.
He's got his anti-hero moments. He's got his. You're right. If I was trying to put him into a single box, it would be reluctant hero. But like, he launched a missile at a ship full of doctors because it needed to be done. Amy.
Amy, do you not like Holden? I'm not clear on this.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
the worst thing that can happen, if James Holden can always go home.
Right.
If it gets tough, he can always go back to the farm. He came from, almost very much a place of privilege. He threw away a military career because, he could. He landed on his feet again and again and again. So, I mean, he is a little bit on the privileged side, where somebody like Naomi, if she had blown up a ship full of aid workers or scientists or whatever, just by the fact that she comes from the belt, they would pursue her, she'd be a traitor and a pirate, she wouldn't get off.
Right. Because he doesn't have that privilege.
He doesn't have the privilege.
And it brings up that Watchmen is a great study on heroes. You are correct. Yeah. We did a stream sometime back about Watchmen. We've actually done 2, haven't we?
Yeah, 2.
We revisited it. But yes, we've done 2 different streams on Watchmen, and we absolutely kind of like discussed the way that heroes are portrayed in that show specifically. So there's a lot going on with anti-heroes and Byronic heroes, if you want to talk about being the architect of your own downfall, and like anti-villains. Is Ozymandias a hero?
No. He's the villain.
But he is sort of an anti-villain because he's trying to do it for the right reasons.
Yeah, but Magneto has that
exactly
complex, and I.
But didn't we just classify Magneto as an anti-hero?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
I think his sort of belief that he's doing the right thing makes him a supremely interesting villain, but he's still a villain in my mind.
I love when you have characters.
I think he can be slightly anti-villain when the occasion calls for it, when his interests align with the heroes of the story. But he's still trying to hurt a subset of people.
I really like stories that have 2 characters who are so similar, and yet it's what I like to call from a certain point of view philosophy, where they're both right, and especially from a certain point of view, and depending on which side of that line you stand on, they stand very, very close together. Both of them both characters are willing to cross the said line if the outcome benefits what they see as their goal. So when Magneto and Professor X join forces to do things, it's always, from a certain point of view reason why they're doing it, which is like, hey, all mutants need to survive, and we need to do this together because it's us against them. Where, X tries to blend in, fit in with, human structure, and Magneto is like, screw humans. I got to look out for my people.
Yeah. Yeah, which is actually why maybe I wouldn't classify him as an anti-hero, and maybe he is in some of the stories and not in others, just depending on,
You know,
where he's
able to
needed at the
work
moment
on-
for that storytelling. But yeah, there's a lot of times where
I can't speak to certain stories where the character might have been interpreted differently because I am not very well versed in the comics. But just in general, based on what I've seen, I think he's my favorite villain of all time. So I enjoy the character greatly, but I still do classify him as a villain.
Right. It's many heroes and villains have a very similar origin story. You know, they were all come from a group that, was downtrodden, beaten down. Yeah, okay. But, and it's just how they respond to that type of, that type of upbringing or that type of events that shape them. Do they harden against the people, or do they, or the society that shaped them, or do they forgive them, or do they, it just depends on how they respond to the same stimuli. Either you get a Superman or you get a dark seed. Just depends on how they respond.
So I can tell you're an old school comic book reader, Nessie.
Who, me?
Yeah, you. Do you know how I can tell just from what you said? Because you called him Darkseid. You read that name many, many, many times before you ever heard it pronounced out loud.
Yeah.
And in general, I think it's Darkseid, but I think it was Mark Twain who said, never make fun of a person for pronouncing something wrong. It means they learned that word from reading it. And we've all been there. But yeah, I'm just like, yeah, Nessie reaching back into the way back stuff with Darkseid. I think each is fine. But
well, I like seed because it's like a bad seed.
Yeah.
No, so I mean, from me, like I don't know the character that well, but I've I know when he was in Smallville and everybody was saying Darkseid, I just kept thinking in my head, that's a Star Wars thing. Don't say that.
Hey man, again, we decided recently that our channel motto is unnecessary pedantry, so I'm just living up to our motto. Thank you. And I will. We all have Aaron M to thank for that. Aaron, you are a godsend. I love that idea. We're going to get merch, and it's going to say unnecessarily pedantic on it.
Yes. Looking forward to getting the merch.
Yeah. So hey, we've been going for close to an hour. So this is the part of this. So I'll do the mid-roll real quick. This is the part of the stream where I'm like, oh yeah, will you please like the video and subscribe to the channel? Last I checked, we are 8 subscribers away from hitting 600. Please ignore that thing I did a second ago. It's quite embarrassing. We got a Patreon. I'm going to shout out our patrons. We've got Sixto Sounds, who I saw in the chat earlier. We've got John Bronsteen. We've got Sir Maura Lee of Starfall. And also the one, the only ridiculous Ed Tollett. Guys, we love you. Thank you so much for the support. If you want to join our Patreon, the link is down in the description. Follow us on Twitter. All those links are down there. Nessie's got her own channel. John's got his own channel where they do stuff that's different to what we do here. Go check them out. Again, links down in the description. What else? What's coming up next week, guys?
We don't know.
It's a secret.
It's a secret even from us. So chat regulars, I throw this to you. what should we talk about next week? What should we talk about coming up? There's a lot of stuff coming out soon that we could talk about. What was some of the stuff we brought up earlier? Okay, so
Umbrella Academy.
Do what?
I said Umbrella Academy.
The Umbrella Academy. I just finished watching The Umbrella Academy. John, I know you've watched, what, one episode?
Yeah, one episode.
And it didn't catch you? It's probably not going to catch you then, because it only gets way, way weirder from there.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, but I just finished The Umbrella Academy, both seasons. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I haven't seen The Boys, but I know there's a second season coming out. We could look at doing something there. Mulan is coming out.
Yes.
Bill and Ted Face the Music is coming out, which is way different than anything we would have done before. But I love Bill and Ted, so like it could be a guilty pleasure for me. Just so throw out some ideas. Amy says The Witcher content. I don't know what I would do additionally to what we've already done, Amy, if I'm honest.
And bigger and better people than us are covering The Witcher right now.
Kelly says New Mutants, and like our one misgiving there is I think the only way to see it right now is in theaters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not keen on going to the movie theater right now.
Yeah, no.
So like, yeah. I see The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I mean, I guess I could. That is not something that had even crossed my mind, but like,
it's like the new Buffy.
I mean, hey, I loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Y'all know that. So,
you know what the new Buffy is? Old episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
yes, but like on DVD or Blu-ray or something, not the HD remaster.
Physical media. I'm rolling my eyes at you, John.
I don't care. I stand by what I said.
I don't care either.
I've seen a few really good suggestions in the chat already, and also versus. I'm sorry. I've read just so many stuff going by. So many stuff. My English are good. Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. We're all on Twitter. If you've got something that you would like to see us cover, shoot us a message. We are not hard to find on social media. We don't hide. But I will say this, something like the Umbrella Academy, at least I've already seen it. I know John hasn't seen it. Nessie, you saw it. You liked it, right? Or you've seen one season, right?
I've seen season 1, and I'm getting ready to dive in season 2. Also getting ready to watch Legend of Korra with Left Dad. He pulled that up the other day. He's like, let's watch this.
Ooh, that's another one we could do, is anything with Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's been on Netflix for a while now, and it's as popular as it's ever been. So, throw some ideas out there. So the short answer, though, is we don't know what we're doing next week, but we'll know soon. We're going to get together after the stream is over, and we'll discuss it and figure it out. So, yeah. But if you've got something, and I've seen a lot of stuff go by here, there seems to be some love for the Umbrella Academy, some for Avatar: The Last Airbender. Some people are saying Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Breaking news.
Shut up. I put it up there myself. So,
if you're not on Twitter, you're not on, social media, you can always leave a comment in the video if you're one of our friends who only joins us on YouTube.
Right. I know several people will watch this after it's live. So, yeah, just leave a comment on the video down below, or, again, Twitter is actually the best way to get a hold of me. I am addicted to my phone, and I check Twitter obsessively, so you can use my addiction to your advantage in that way.
And we have an official Gmail account. You can email us.
Yes.
Your suggestions too.
Yeah. If you don't want to use, if you don't use Twitter, you can email us at we3dragons@gmail.com. 3 is spelled out. We3dragons. Here, I'll just type it real quick and put it in the. What do you call that? It's called a chat box, Stephen.
Yes, the chat box. Post a comment.
I don't multitask that well. My apologies. But yeah, you can email us there. Just put it in the chat. Yeah. John, Nessie, what do you guys got coming up that you've been working on lately? What's up next on your channels?
What's going on, John?
So this Thursday at 2:00 p.m., I'll be streaming with Carol Brown, who was previously on my channel for a Tolkien discussion. And we are going to be talking about the 1979 science fiction classic Alien.
Yay!
So,
Ooh, aliens. We need to talk about Ripley.
Yeah, and I even I have a special shirt for that occasion, so I will be wearing that. And yeah, it's gonna be a great time. I don't typically like scary movies, but Alien is one of my top movies of all time. So, what do you got coming up, Nessie?
Well, it's a first on my channel. We're going to be recording content. So fingers crossed everything works well. I have an upcoming episode scheduled to record with the Learn Hands podcast. Our good friends of the channel, Clint and Mary from Learn Hands, are going to come on my channel, and we are going to try the heck out of Adolphus Mercury. So look forward to that crossover episode coming up real soon. It will be released as a premiere on my channel, and the audio feed will be released on Learned Hands in podcast form. So we have that coming up, and maybe in the not so terribly distant future, one of these guys here who may or may not, be a first-time visitor on my channel, and we're going to discuss lots of things from the Menagerie and how the series of Magical Menagerie and how it applies across D&D, some Magic the Gathering. What are some other things, Stephen?
Those are the two big ones I want to talk about, but I also feel like Dragons and the Elder Scrolls are worth a good mention as well.
And maybe a tiny bit of Pokemon.
And maybe a little bit of Pokemon, yeah. Which will not be me. That will be all you.
So that's what I got. Looking forward to it. Mm-hmm.
Also wanted to say hi to an enemy spy. He's in my D&D group that plays on Saturdays. And so we've been playing D&D together for, I don't know, close to 2 years now. It's good to see you, man. I know a lot of Sundays you're working, but it's good to see you here at the live. Scott W. showed up too. What's up?
Hi, Scott.
Hey.
I've been seeing him in our Zoom calls lately a lot more, so that's been kind of cool getting to talk with him. Yeah, so shall we talk about heroes, or is there something else?
No, I think we're good. Let's dive back in.
Okay, great. So the one thing I wanted to make sure we talked about before we move on to something meatier, which I think might be Lord of the Rings, was the idea of like what a hero was a very specific thing to an ancient Greek, and it was a person who had martial abilities above and beyond that of a common mortal man, often beyond what is even achievable by a mortal man. Someone like you, Odysseus's wife knew it was him because he was the only one strong enough to string his bow. Like literally, there was not another man alive that could do it. Achilles had that sort of thing going where like no blade could touch him. You know, of course, we all know the story of the heel, of the Achilles heel, and all that. But like, it's not that he's impervious; it's that he is such a puissant warrior that literally you can't touch him. You can't kill a guy you can't actually manage to stab.
Right. And they generally have like some type of divine patronage or they are descendant
Right.
of the, yes. They're not total, even if they're totally mortal, like Odysseus was. He had, you know, patronage of like Athena.
Right. Well, I don't think to the ancient Greeks. I think their heroes were still mortal. You know,
Well, some were and some weren't.
Okay, fair enough. But like, because in the Iliad, you know, there's a lot of heroes that get name dropped. Ajax and Hector and Agamemnon, and all of these people are warriors who are just such a cut above the rest that they fight entire armies by themselves, and they fight each other to a standstill for 10 years.
And it's funny looking at it as sort of that classical, you know, view of a hero, whereas we consider many of those people to be anti-heroes, especially Achilles, who exhibits a lot of selfish qualities.
Right.
So.
Not great, Bob.
Yeah.
He is known for his terrible temper and how he would lash out at even his friends and his enemies. And when he was in his black, foul moods, and it didn't matter, you know, if who you were, if you came up on them, he could kill you just as easily if you were a friend or foe.
But that also tells us a lot about what the Greeks valued. Yeah. That idea of like going to war for your clan, your city-state, and like the whole reason that the Trojan War kicked off was because of, okay, Paris took Helen and they went to Troy, and it wasn't really about love. It was about, you took what was mine and I have to get it back. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a very patriarchal thing. Patriarchy, drink. But yeah, so you can learn a lot from about what a culture truly values based on how they portray their heroes, which leads me into Amy's point here very well, I think. She wants us to talk about her favorite hero, Hua Mulan, protected her family and her homeland. And what are, you know, the idea of like filial piety and, you know, keeping the honor of your family, and the idea of China as a whole, which is something we'll get into when we talk about the movie entitled, oddly enough, Hero. John and I are going to be discussing that movie at some point in the not too distant future. But yes, she does embody what China at that time thought were the greatest values for a person to hold. The idea of like protecting the honor of your family over your own individual desires or needs, and the idea of protecting your homeland. And a lot of societies have that sort of like defend the mother country type of idea, but China has been around for so long, and it's such an ancient culture that it's kind of embedded in a way that it's not in a lot of other cultures. You know, a lot of societies and cultures want to defend the family, not always the homeland in the same way, but it does say something about the culture in which she lives and the time in which she lives.
Ancient Ireland has very similar traditions in their hero stories, because their base of their society wasn't so much the king or the high king as it was the local clan chiefs, the family. It started from the ground up as opposed to from the top down. So your first loyalty was to your family, to your clan, and defending the honor of that clan. To keep your word, to keep your bond, because your bond was what you were valued as your worth in society. Someone who was able to keep their word, to keep their contracts, to stand up and keep their promises was valued over someone who had even like greater martial fame. So you could be a great warrior, but you could have shit for honor, and you would be seen as lower in society. So someone like, say, Cuchulainn, who is featured in a lot of their the stories, their traditional stories. You know, he was at one point he wasn't considered to be an outlaw, but he did great deeds for his clan and was able to regain not only his name but his honor. And he's seen as one of the greatest heroes of Gaelic culture.
Mm-hmm. And Potter points out that to join the Fianna, you had to be well versed in poetry as well.
Yes, it was a very well-rounded individual.
I think we can see some of that in sort of like the samurai culture too, but like that's more historical. Let's address Anna's comment. Can we talk about some more female heroes? We need more about. We've talked more about men than women, let alone other minorities. I do understand where you're coming from. Unfortunately, just due to the nature of the of history of humanity, men have been written about more, so there are more examples. But yes, I would love to talk more about some women or female heroes.
We have quite a few in modern history we can talk about. We can talk about people like, especially in fiction, we can talk about people like Sarah Connor, or Ellen Ripley. These are very great.
Yeah. Sarah Connor, very much a reluctant hero in the beginning, and maybe in the first one, and maybe an anti-hero by the time we get Terminator 2. She's pretty extreme in her viewpoints, willing to, machine gun man in his living room in front of his kids, but she's doing it for the right reasons. She's a fascinating study in what it takes, or the hero's journey that she goes on is really interesting. Lilu Dallas Multipass. She is the supreme being, the perfect, the perfect human, I think. I guess that's the best way to put it. But yes, she is a fantastic hero as well. Although, like, the thing is, like, there's this idea of hero, and then there's this idea of the hero's journey, which is like the call to action, rejecting the call, meeting the mentor, traveling, entering the underworld, all of those steps. I don't know it by heart, but I think everybody here is probably at least passingly familiar with it. Lilu doesn't really go through that, because she's just awesome from the moment she comes into existence. Yeah, Corbin Dallas is the reluctant hero. I agree, Liz.
Lilu is more like, I guess, maybe like the goddess figure.
Yeah, and okay,
I've seen a lot of Star Wars characters mentioned, but I would point out that I think one of the most underappreciated heroes in Star Wars is actually Padme, and I think because she doesn't wield a lightsaber. She's not charging on a battlefield. She's,
I've seen her charge onto a battlefield.
No, you're right. But I'm thinking more later on in Phantom Menace. She very much is. But I meant that to say that she's dealing in the political arena a lot. I think she's very heroic and in her idealism and trying to stop war from happening, and the fact that I think she is the protagonist of the Phantom Menace, and she takes a lot on herself where she decides to, the political system fails her, so she goes back to liberate her home, and I think she doesn't get talked about enough, compared to other characters in Star Wars, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure I did a shout out for her and I don't like necessarily what George did with her character by the end of the prequel trilogy. I think she deserved a lot better. But I think she is one of the strongest characters in those films.
Like Star Wars, it's just kind of weird the way it happens. Like there's one woman in Star Wars, and then we get Padme, and it's sort of like we get some equal footing. We start to see women wielding lightsabers. Then we get people like Jyn Erso, like Ahsoka Tano, and then Rey. I mean, my God, Rey. I love Rey. I'm not a huge fan of the new movies, but I am a big fan of that character in particular. And she's kind of got the reluctant hero thing going a lot of the time. Although, she definitely embraces her role a lot more as sort of her 3-movie trilogy pans out. But yeah, Star Wars has actually gone a long way towards giving us a lot of female heroes that we didn't have, that are, they've done a lot to sort of equal the balance there.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting there.
Aaron, you must have, I think Wonder Woman might have been the very first character we mentioned in the entire stream today, because especially the way she was presented in the movie that came out a few years ago, she is so morally forthright, optimistic, almost to the point of being cheesy, but you can't help but love her because she's willing to put her money where her mouth is and to take action in the defense and upholding of those ideals.
Well, I mean, I know the comparison that got thrown around a lot when the movie came out was the original, the Superman movie, Christopher Reeve, that sense of optimism. And I found that, I mean, I don't necessarily think the Wonder Woman film was a perfect film, but I really loved that sense of optimism coming from the character in the face of, sort of the overwhelming doom and gloom of the other DC films. And it was really great to see. And I mean, I can't wait for the new one whenever we actually get to see it.
Well, any young girl growing up in the, in the 70s, early 80s, you saw Linda Carter's portrayal of Wonder Woman on television every week. And it was the first time for a lot of us that we saw a female portrayed in the superhero role like that. We'd seen Superman, Spider-Man, what have you, but seeing Wonder Woman, Linda Carter on the screen like that, and being such a wonderful actress and doing such a breakout role, it just inspired a lot of us, to, hey, you can do things, you can be a hero. So, she was very near and dear to me.
One day.
See, well, what Padar said about, is it always the most desirable? You know what? Damn it. I'm going to say yes for me. I mean, I get that the modern thing is that, anti-heroes are the ones who can survive because they can be just as duplicitous, as the villains. But you know what? I'm going to say it. There's a reason I like, good old-fashioned heroes, because I like to know that good will win the day. And so,
at least in a fantasy world.
Yeah. I mean, will that work in the real world? No, but I do like to see that in my stories. So yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously there's room for all of these different types of heroes in literature and storytelling. Obviously. There's plenty of room for all of them. I just wanted to make sure we brought up a couple of examples from the one story we all share pretty universally, and that is A Song of Ice and Fire, because there are some excellent women heroes in A Song of Ice and Fire. Yeah, you're right. The women in like there's you're right, Amy. And
Yeah,
Tim,
because in Age of Resistance, Rian is, I mean, he's not entirely passive, but I'd say he's the most passive sort of the three main characters.
he is also very reactionary as opposed to like.
Yeah, that's a better word. Yeah.
But yeah, so like who among us would not say that Brienne of Tarth is a hero? Like maybe in the truest sense of the word. She has ideals. She sticks to those ideals to the point of being fully prepared to sacrifice her own life multiple times.
Yep.
She might be a little bit of a romantic hero because of the way she has rejected the established norms of her society and the way her society rejects her because of it. So I think that is, but she is her sort of moral uprightness just makes her land solidly in that, like, no, she's just a hero category.
Yep.
And what's so great about that is that she's able to achieve victories and positive outcomes through that heroism. She's not, she doesn't meet a grim end because of that, like
right
does. And I really appreciate that. I don't want a story that's just all, noble heroes losing, because to me that's just depressing. You do have to have some hope, and I think Brienne really represents that.
See, I just wanted to let Agnieszka know that we just became friends. She has good vibes for Sansa's future if George ever writes Winds of Winter. Sansa's my favorite character in A Song of Ice and Fire, so we just, anybody who says good things are happening there, you're on my good side list. Oh man, like we could just go on and on and on. Every story has a hero.
Where is there a better part in that embodies hope in the story other than, when it's Brienne's no chance and no choice section, where it just embodies everything that you think of for, a hero to be, just putting themselves out there, knowing that what the right thing is, they're going to do the right thing, they're going to protect the weak. I mean, she exemplifies every knightly trait, at that point. And it's chef's kiss.
But like the way George writes, most of his women characters are not allowed to be that sort of like martial hero. A few of them are allowed to sort of pursue that idea, but I would argue that there are heroic characters in his story that are women that are not martial characters, like Sansa, like to some. I mean, is the Queen of Thorns a hero? Is she an anti-hero? Like, I love her. I know that.
It's one of those from a certain point of view.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like Brienne is the, figures like Brienne and Ned, I can sort of solidly pin down fitting my definition of a hero. But so many of the characters, it really, like even Ned, it's like you could honestly, if you're looking from certain characters' points of view, you could say that he's not a hero. It's just because of, how many different perspectives we get in the story, and everything is so subjective. And that's why we love the story.
Right.
Yeah. So
being able to be inside the character's head, and you're there with their feelings, their motivations, that why they're doing a certain thing. Where if you're just seeing the act without knowing what the motivation for it was. So, yeah.
Right. So, John, I promised you Lord of the Rings.
And
there's a lot of heroes in A Song of Ice and Fire, but like people have talked about them to death too. Like, at least the majority of us come from that A Song of Ice and Fire fandom. So, like, there are people who have discussed it at length and probably better than we could do in a short span anyway. And I wanted to make sure we touched on Lord of the Rings because I actually think that a lot of yeah, I see you, an enemy spy.
Yeah, and you guys know for the title card, I had to throw out.
Of course. And as soon as I thought, I was like, that's it. That's the one.
Of course,
But,
yeah.
But like, yeah, I think a lot of what, I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish my thought. Tolkien has informed our modern perceptions of heroism a lot.
Yes.
So go, John.
Go.
What's really interesting about, we're talking about, Song of Ice and Fire and then going to Lord of the Rings is that Lord of the Rings gives us that sort of objective truth about the characters. We can kind of trust what we're getting, or at least we're told to trust it. Who knows? Maybe the whole record of the story is being presented by a stewed.
Told from the perspective of the elves. It's all elven propaganda.
Yeah.
All elven propaganda.
Yeah, I think Pat and his orcs would have a lot to say about that. No, but it was something that I really wanted to bring up. And Stephen, we talked about this the other day because somebody mentioned Aragorn as a reluctant hero.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's going to be very much the point of view of someone who is either has only seen the films or is mostly a film fan, because Aragorn is not a reluctant hero in the books. And the moment he comes on screen, he's wielding Narsil, which hasn't yet been reforged, even though it gets reforged sooner in the books than it does in the films. In the films, it doesn't happen until the third film. In the books, as soon as they are preparing to leave Rivendell on the journey, that's when it gets reforged into Andorra. But he comes on the scene and he's immediately like, I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur. So he's very proud of his lineage and he's on a set mission, whereas in the films, he doesn't want it. He rejects it and he doesn't think he's worthy. He has to come to that place of accepting that kingship and taking that journey on. And that's in large part because our entire conception of heroes has changed over time, even from when Tolkien wrote the books to the films coming out with Peter Jackson, Philippa Boyens, and Fran Walsh writing the screenplay, because we like our reluctant heroes now. So Aragorn, from their point of view, had to go on this journey so that we could sympathize with him, because maybe audiences wouldn't like, a quote unquote hero kind of coming on screen and saying, "Hey, everybody, I'm the hero." And yeah, exactly. I actually think that it works quite well in the books, but again, you get into the whole thing of books and film are different, and especially a book written in the 1950s is different from films being released in the early 2000s. So yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. He's known as Strider when he comes in, but as far as within the context of the story, he's ready to assume that mantle when we meet him.
I think a lot of it has to do with timing, because he wasn't the first of his line that has had to wait.
Yeah.
His father had to wait. They all knew that they were the heirs of Isildur, but the timing wasn't right for them to reemerge, to take their place, to recover the lost kingdom, because the ring hadn't surfaced, for one thing. Sauron and hadn't gathered his armies, and the timing wasn't right. There was always this dread doom hanging over them, but when certain things aligned, then that's when it was time for Isildur, for Isildur's heir to come forward. So it's more providence, maybe.
And also, there's the fact that as far as viewing him as a hero, it's sort of a quality of all of the Middle Earth films that Peter Jackson did, even though I don't think it was done as well in the Hobbit films. But this idea of giving the audience these very heroic characters so we can recognize heroism in them. Aragorn is given a little bit more so that we can sympathize with him. But even if you look in the Hobbit films, in the book, the dwarves are not heroic at all, except for maybe at the end of the story when they come charging out of the mountain. They fight bravely, so there's some heroism, but for the majority of the story, they're just shoving Bilbo in front of them and saying, you go do this. And so Bilbo is very much the hero of the Hobbit, but in the films, they decided they wanted the dwarves to be heroic. And so you have Thorin, who I think is kind of an anti-hero in the films. And so that you can build up to that moment in film 3 where they're fighting and you really, and you care about these guys and all that. You can argue about how successfully that was done, but that was clearly their aim. But of course, like I said, in the books, they're pretty selfish and they're not there to necessarily to regain their homeland. They go to steal back the gold.
Right.
Yeah. Even be more like a Byronic hero as being the architect of his own downfall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very much.
Agnieszka asks, so who is the one and only real hero of Lord of the Rings, Frodo or Aragorn? And I would argue neither. I'm sorry.
This is where we're going to get into a debate, because I don't think it's as simple as Stephen will make it sound.
Samwise mother effing Gamgee. I'm quoting what is it? I'm quoting an enemy spy from earlier. Samwise. So like it is crazy that so when Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings, he clearly intended, or at least I think he intended, for Aragorn to be perceived as the main hero.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You don't think so?
Nope, absolutely not.
You think he intended for Frodo to be seen as the main hero?
I think
he's...
I'm conflicted as to whether he means for Frodo or Sam to be perceived as the main hero, but I definitely don't think he intends for Aragorn to be perceived as the hero.
But you also say the way they sort of changed Aragorn for the movie adaptations to make him more of a reluctant hero, and he's the chiseled jaw, handsome white guy, which is honestly this is the hero signal. But and there's a lot of people agreeing with me that Sam is in fact the hero of the story, and he is a reluctant hero to some degree. He doesn't want to be here doing this stuff, but his moral and his obligation to his friend supersedes all of that.
I think I do think that it's I always kind of go back and forth between Frodo and Sam. And honestly, I view this the same as whether we're talking about the films or the books. I think it comes down to Frodo or Sam. I think Sam can very easily be seen as the hero because he does step to the forefront by the end of the story, and he kind of helps Frodo get to that final place. But see, and Frodo is often seen as maybe not being the hero because he falters by the end, but he does things that sets some of Sam's what's the word I'm looking for? Sam's actions into motion. It's Frodo very clearly passes on what Gandalf has told him to Sam, where he, when referring to Gollum, he tells Sam we should pity Gollum, and he may yet have some good, he may still serve some purpose in the end for good or ill. And it's because of that Sam does actually spare Gollum before heading up the mountain. I think that, Frodo falters in the end, but I think that he helps set Sam on his own path. And I think that Frodo could still be considered the hero of the story. But Sam makes a damn good argument. Just because he's the one who sort of stays true through to the very end. And I won't argue with anybody who says that Sam is the hero, but I do not in any way agree that Aragorn is presented as the hero of the story in the books. I really don't.
I think it was
I think that Tolkien intends the hobbits to be seen as the true hero.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, John. Just like in the early in the elves.
I think if anything, the films prop Aragorn up to be more of a central hero, especially for the Two Towers, where I would argue he's the central protagonist of that film.
I think that's actually a really good way of looking at it. Like, he's almost the red herring hero to a certain degree. And I will defer to your superior knowledge of that particular franchise.
I mean,
I know the movie's pretty well.
I mean, he is a hero.
Right.
But he may not be
the hero. Right. He's not the hero of the story.
Yeah.
Because the story is ultimately about the hobbits.
And like
their story.
And when you contrast it to, like, I mean, it's not analogous, but like his experiences, Tolkien's own experiences in war, very much informed what he was writing about. And the hobbits are just those, those Englishmen from the countryside who went off to serve king and country.
King and country, yeah.
And there is something to be said for seeing those, to seeing the heroism in that. Which, like, there's the trope of the war hero, like that. We've all heard war hero. Personally, like, it's a term that I have become very disabused of using. The older I get, the more pacifistic I become. Like Yoda said, Yoda said it best: "Wars not make one great."
Yeah, a lot of war heroes are, at least some that I know, are not, like, they don't think of it as something heroic. It was something that they had to do.
Right.
Somebody recognized them for it.
Right. When you say war hero, you often mean excellent killer.
And actually, what's interesting about this discussion is that I almost view Frodo as fitting the bill of, at least being perceived as a war hero by the people around him. I think that he actually feels he's burdened by what's happened. He doesn't want honors for what he's gone through. He just between having been stabbed by the Nazgul and probably the knowledge that he wasn't able to fulfill the mission on his own. Yeah. That's really sort of sticks with him and haunts him. So that's the whole reason why he eventually needs to go to the Grey Havens. He needs that burden taken off of him. So, and that's kind of why I still regard him as the hero. He's the hero who doesn't believe he was a hero. And
that's a very good point, Ed.
And that is actually a quality I find that modern sentimentality, we like a hero who thinks they're not a hero. Even like that kid on the news who like saw some other kid he didn't know in the swimming pool was drowning and he jumped in and saved him. People are calling him a hero. It's like, I don't really feel like a hero. That's right. And that warms the cockles of our heart. We love to see that type of thing. And I would describe that act as heroic, and the person that did it as heroic to a certain extent. I'm sorry, I got really distracted by this. I
Leech.
made at least 2 Bowie references so far. Not nearly enough, given that we've been going for an hour and 40 minutes. We'll try to cram in at least one more. But yeah, my apologies.
Yeah, and right here, I think this nails it. Someone who does extraordinary acts to protect their comrades, not necessarily someone who just kills a lot of enemies.
I think you've got a good point. I would agree with that sentiment. Although I feel like often that means killing the bad guys so that your guys are safe. But you're right. It doesn't always mean that.
I mean, it's not like you're going out and, the bullets are flying and whatever. And you just go out and say, hey, can we all just like chill out for a little while and think things over? And that's not how it works. It's just, let's get through this. Let's get over this obstacle. Let's survive another day, and survival.
We could be heroes just for one day. Okay, now I did it once, and that's all you're going to get because I just can't even get close to Bowie. But most of us can't. I can't really do him justice. So,
this was a very good point, I thought.
Oh, I like that. I like that. See, that sort of perspective about Frodo feeling like he failed, like you don't really get that from the films.
No.
And let's be honest, like I've read The Lord of the Rings one time and it was 20 years ago.
See, I get it sort of summed up in that moment when, beginning when, Aragorn says, my friends, you bow to no one. And everybody kneels down, and all the other hobbits are kind of looking overwhelmed by it. And Frodo just has this look in his face like, I don't deserve any of this.
Right.
And so I don't know. For me, I do think that that's captured in the films, but maybe that comes from a place of me having been familiar with the books, and so I'm already looking for that, maybe.
Right. An enemy spy says, I think Tony Stark is a great example of a hero who doesn't think of himself as one. A lot of what he does is motivated by a sense of guilt over his perceived failings. I think that's an excellent point. We did touch on Tony Stark a little bit earlier in the stream, probably before.
I'd say that's him eventually. Maybe not. I don't know that that's necessarily always the case for him.
Well, I think a lot of his ambition
more prevalent than you think it is, John. Like the entire first, he is often quite motivated by the idea of Jensen's death and over the idea that his weapons are being used by terrorist organizations.
and not just his stuff. Think about all the things, about his dad, inheriting the Stark legacy. And with it.
But I think he does go through a period of very much thinking himself a hero, though.
Yeah. I mean, maybe towards like the middle of his arc. But like that leads, he becomes the architect, or not, doesn't become the architect of his own downfall, but like he fails and sees himself at the end as less heroic as well, even though in the end he does, probably the one act that we all universally recognize as heroic. I will sacrifice my own life for the benefit of someone else.
Yeah, and that's actually why I find his character arc so amazing. Just even though, obviously we've had lots of talks and I'm not the biggest fan of the MCU, but I think his character arc is great because he goes from that moment at the end of the first Iron Man where, he sort of cheekily says, I am Iron Man, where he's digging it, he's sort of like giving himself over to that. So there's a sort of pride in that versus, the end of Endgame where it's all about sacrifice. It's all about giving, his life for the, for the good of others. And the way he says, I am Iron Man. It's resignation, and it's I think that's a beautiful character arc.
I do too. And I wanted to make sure we talked about the female heroes of Lord of the Rings. Unfortunately, there's really only 2 women. Well, I guess we could, because Galadriel is not a hero in that story. She is too passive to be considered a hero, I think. And a lot of what Arwen does in the film, she doesn't do in the books.
Yeah, if we're talking film, we have a bit more room, wiggle room.
Yeah.
But in the books, the only one who really fits the mold of a hero would be Eowyn.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
And so that's why I'm a bit more, a lot of people get grouchy about, creating Tauriel for the Hobbit films, but I actually really like her character, and I think was probably desperately needed, because otherwise the Hobbit is just a story of just a bunch of dudes. Yeah.
Bunch of dudes.
Yeah, and I think she's very heroic. I love her character. I think Evangeline Lilly did a great job. But since we can talk about Eowyn in the context of both the films and the books, would you guys classify her as a classical hero, or
Eowyn?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like morally upright. She wants to take care of her people and her family.
Mm-hmm.
She's very sort of like, she's got a very Mulan sort of vibe to her,
Yes.
Be damned, the patriarchy, drink.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I want or what I feel like I need to do, because just because I'm a woman doesn't mean that I can't fight for my home and my loved ones as well.
I just thought I'd ask in case there was room for any of our usual disagreements, but I don't think
there is. I think she's pretty heroic, and without a whole lot of like shade to being a Byronic hero or a reluctant hero or anything like that. I think she's just pretty straightforwardly heroic.
Mm-hmm. Classic hero.
Agnieszka says, so we talk about most important people in stories. Do you think that the trio of Harry, Hermione, and Ron is more important than Harry, Dumbledore, and Snape? Or isn't it? I mean, yes, and like, what a great example of a hero trio, too. And the different approaches and the different looks that heroes can have. Because I would say, none of them are reluctant heroes. None of them are, bringing about their own downfall. They're all just variations on that sort of core hero archetype. But I think the simplest way I can answer your question is that the more important trio is Harry, Hermione, and Ron, because they are peers.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, can we step back for a second?
Sure.
Because I do want to talk about this point that Aaron brings up with regard to Eowyn, that she, as it's put, neglects her duty to her people to instead go and fight on the battlefield. So how do you feel about that? Because on the one hand, I feel like, it's assumed that she's the one who should stay because she's the woman, and and she's being told that that's her place to stay behind. But she just wants to, actually fight for her people. So I don't know. How do you feel? How do you guys feel about that?
I think it's a really interesting point to bring up. Oh, sorry. You go right ahead, Nessie. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, how is she any different than, say, the hero that's told, you're too young, you need to stay at home, you need to mind the farm, you need to do this, you need to do that, and yet they disobey what they were told to go out and be the hero. it's not so it's neglecting your duties or going against what you're being told to do is kind of part of that hero's journey as well, to say to want to experience the unknown, be outside of your walls, to want to experience in this case the heroism of glory of finding fame on the battlefield. It's it's just part of that hero trope. You don't yell at King Arthur because he went and pulled the sword out when he was supposed to go do something else. He was neglecting his duties as a squire to go off and do his own thing. So
right, but again, this gets wrapped up in that idea of like the hero fights,
right?
And that's like we started off with the definition of hero, and the very first definition mentions basically martial ability. So right, I think that's always going to, like, that doesn't define a hero, but like it's always going to be one of those considerations. Going to go fight for what you believe in, to put your life and your health and well-being on the line for that is a heroic action. And that's probably the one thing that ties all the hero archetypes together, is that willingness to put your body on the line, to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. Anti-heroes do it. Romantic heroes, Byronic heroes, reluctant heroes, they all are willing to put themselves in harm's way for one reason or another. Be that because they're getting paid, because it's expected from them for society, or because they believe it's the morally right thing to do. I would say that Eowyn thinks it is morally right for her to go fight. She has an ability to fight, and why
they're outnumbered.
And they're outnumbered. Why should she not try to defeat the people that want to destroy her people instead of just sitting back home?
I guess my only question for that would be, does she have a fellow conspirator who maybe is this, a steward who would be left in control? Because I do feel like there is an element of selfishness if she just takes off and leaves nobody in control, because that's potentially leaving the people left behind vulnerable. But her desire to want to go off and fight, I think is good, because she feels she should be able to do that. I guess I can't remember. It's maybe been a while since I have actually read the book straight through. So I'd have to go back and look if that's something that's talked about or not.
Yeah, I mean,
fair enough. Oh my gosh, it is 5 minutes until 7 o'clock my local time. We usually keep these things to 2 hours. I mean, I guess we could run over a little bit, but we still have to have a meeting afterward. And
I do just want to make mention of this real quick, that the screenwriters made a point of, at first they were going to make Arwen sort of more sort of traditionally what we think of as heroic, like fighting in battles and things of that nature. But then they decided that they could make her a very, strong in character by hewing more closely to her material that's found maybe not within the context of the actual story, but in the appendices and stuff. So I don't think being heroic necessarily always means, charging the battlefield.
Not always, but like a willingness to do that, I think is.
Yeah.
I do like that they gave her the role that at the forge, at the flight to the forge, that in the books they gave to Glorfindel, correct?
Yeah. Yes,
I do like it that they gave her that scene, which proves that she's willing to stand up to the Nazgul. That's pretty that's pretty badass. She and Eowyn both stand up to the Nazgul.
having said everything I just said about different ways to show heroism, that does not mean, by the way, that I am not looking forward to one day seeing those deleted scenes of her fighting at Helm's Deep. Because even though they decided not to put that stuff into the films, I still want to see it because I'm sure it's cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, Stephen. You were saying about running over.
I mean, we might run over a little bit, but like for those of you in the chat, bring up your heroes now or forever hold your peace, because I'm gonna need to go to the restroom and to have a cigarette and all that stuff.
And a staff meeting.
So if there is a hero we haven't discussed yet or a heroic idea, that's a good one. John 117, Master Chief. For those of you uninitiated with the Halo universe,
I have no idea.
So he's the protagonist of the Halo video games. It's hard for me to classify him directly, partly because as sort of the self-insert in a first-person shooter, you don't get a whole lot of personality out of him that's not in a cutscene, and he's very much a sort of like very straightforward military-minded person. He is almost a living weapon crafted for war and little else, but he definitely fits the hero archetype because he is willing to put his life on the line, and he also does it not just because it's his orders, but like he tries to, especially as the story goes on and he comes to understand his enemies, he seeks more peaceful solutions with them. Anyway, it's quite good. I think that's a good call there. An enemy spy. Fattest Leech says Corwin of Amber. Do y'all know who that is? Because I'm sorry, I do not.
One of the, I think, 9 Princes of Amber. Roger's Lasney. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just not familiar with it.
This. You guys have a personal and real life hero?
An IRL hero? Yes. And it's fortunate that he also plays my like fantasy sci-fi archetypal hero, and that's Mark Hamill. Love that man to death. Even if he does drink green sea cow milk straight from the boob.
Yeah.
So, what about you, John?
It's quite honestly my mother, because she has been through a whole lot in her life, from heart attacks to breast cancer, and of late even worse difficulties, which I don't really want to get into on here, but she's been struggling with these things going all the way back to starting in 1992, and she is pretty much the bravest person I know. So I've told her on many occasions she's my hero, and I mean it. So.
Yeah, well,
that's beautiful. And way to throw me under the bus with my own mother in the chat.
I'm sorry, Steve.
Somebody else, and you're like, I know my mom, and I'm like, thanks.
Well, not exactly John, but it's the same with me because my mom has always been my hero.
Yeah, well, my mom is not my hero.
Your mom is everybody's hero.
Yeah, your mom is everybody else's hero, Stephen. Yeah,
but not mine. You don't have to live with her.
Yeah. A similar background to John's mom. My mother had polio when she was 18 months old, and she had to relearn how to walk. She lived with physical disabilities her entire life, carried it with grace. She never let it slow her down one little bit. She was highly offended if anyone ever said that she couldn't do anything, or that because she was a cripple or what have you. She broke a lot of barriers. She kicked a lot of doors open that had been, denied people with disabilities. And she had other health problems. She's just the strongest person that I know or knew.
So love to our moms.
Yes, moms are heroes. Yes.
Yes.
But a lot of them.
Amy says, did we talk about Joan of Arc? We did not. We actually talked very, very little about people in the real world in this stream. And, hey, we cover like genre storytelling here for the most part anyway. So
I like that there's a lot of parallels. I think George pulls a lot from Joan of Arc and uses it in Brienne's story. It's just that type of pure, female character. She's young. She got radicalized. She takes up the sword to, fight against the enemy. So, and then of course gets burned at the stake for her efforts.
So like, hot take on Joan of Arc. I'm not trying to crap on a feminist icon or anything like that, but she was a religious zealot who helped France kill a bunch of Englishmen. So I'm not a huge fan.
She's the martial hero type. She was a good killer.
Yeah.
She's a good leader of killers. So she falls under that category. But yeah.
I do want to mention, I know we're coming to the end, and I feel like I don't want to crap on us too much because it is a sort of symptom of lack of representation in media overall. We did eventually get to talking about some female heroes, but not a lot of people of color.
That's true.
And it's just a sad fact that it's been predominantly, white males, and then even when it's females, a lot of white women.
White females, right.
Yeah, so I mean, I did mention, Finn from the new Star Wars films. I think he's a wonderful hero, and even I feel like probably another symptom of, what I was just talking about. I feel like he kind of gets, the short shift a bit in, as the films go on.
Yeah, he does not get a whole lot written for him to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is unfortunate. And like, we are trying to be more conscious of the way we're sharing representation and sharing our platform with people of color in our community. And hope we want to do more than we already have. But you're right. It is indicative of our culture at large, like, that we do not have sort of like an ethnically diverse group of people to draw from to talk about heroes.
Yeah, and I mean, and of course, I'm not the biggest MCU fan, so I probably wasn't jumping to talk about this, but I think there's a fantastic, we've gotten a fantastic hero in Black Panther, lots of heroes.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, from that film, and but there needs to be more.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And you're right. Black Panther did a fantastic movie with a predominantly black cast. All the heroes, with the exception of like Martin Freeman, were.
And I love that he kind of gets put in his place at various points in the movie.
But the bad guy, like Ulysses Claw, white guy, is the villain. And there are other people of color in there. You've got the Falcon, whose name is Sam something, I don't know. And you've got Rhodey, War Machine in there, played by...
Sam Wilson.
Sam Wilson, there you go. And Don Cheadle plays yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what is T'Challa's sister's name?
We got a shout out earlier.
Yeah, and it's not Okoye. Okoye is his main bodyguard. Shuri?
Yeah,
Sure.
she's great. I love
Fantastic.
her. I want to see more and more of her.
Yeah, me too.
In lots of those films. Let her cross over to all the other ones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Fury.
I agree. And like, it would be nice to see like maybe an Asian hero that wasn't a kung fu monk or something, you know?
Yeah.
Although, like, I'm not going to deny wushu films. You know, like a lot of them have found some appeal in Western market. So movies like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Hero, like the movie Hero, we're probably when John and I discussed that over on John Webster Film eventually, like we're going to talk about what it means to be a hero.
Yeah.
Because
things get murky.
Because things get very murky. Like, who is the hero of that story? You know, it's a tough call. It's pretty fantastic. There we go, Praxidiki Mang. So that's a good call there, Powder. But yeah, I agree. I mean, okay, Luke Cage, Cedric, good point. Luke Cage, Storm also.
Storm. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge X-Men fan, so Storm is a big one, and I want to see Storm as she is in the comics. I mean, God love Halle Berry, but it's like I want to see that really, you know, proud operatic Storm wielding all of her, you know,
with the mohawk and everything.
Yeah,
yeah, but like,
and.
One thing Luke Cage, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to shout out to the CW for its Black Lightning series, which is it has practically an entire cast person of color, and it's wonderful. If you haven't watched it, you're missing out.
Yeah, I mean the thing that Luke Cage has that Storm doesn't, though, is that Luke Cage has been the primary character in a sort of screen adaptation. And Storm, she's been around for so long. She deserves. I think she does. We need a Storm movie, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
yes.
She's never been like my favorite X-Man, but like I didn't read the X-Men comics, so I come to the X-Men through the movies. So she's never been put in a prominent enough role for me to have that type of connection.
Yeah, and I will say, you guys know I was kind of grouchy about Disney buying out Fox because I wasn't crazy about the X-Men being absorbed into the MCU because I want them to have their own sort of stage rather than just being part of the sort of Avengers cog. But I will say that as I've gone more and more into reading some of the comics and stuff, and Amy and Kelly have been helping me sort of, you know, jump into that world. It's reminded me of some of the stuff like from the animated series that I really loved as a kid. And so if it creates the opportunity to maybe get closer and nail some of those characters from the comic books in a way that the films maybe didn't like Storm, and that's great. And also I actually am, you know, this whole discussion that we're having, I think there's going to be a lot of room for more diversity in terms of just existing characters, you know, who maybe weren't diverse enough, you know, in any prior versions of X-Men. It'll be nice to see if they, you know, I suspect they will. Hopefully they'll consider going that route. I know there will be plenty of fanboys getting upset about that. There usually are, but nonetheless, I hope that doesn't deter them because I think it's time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do too. If I was going to write a story, so like I have, you guys know I want to have a movie studio. I would love to tell the story of sort of like a queer Hispanic or Latinx woman, like that hero does not exist in the lexicon of superheroes. It probably does in some comic book somewhere, but that is not a mainstream character. And I feel like that is the last great frontier for our hero storytelling, is to like move as far away from the sort of like white guy doing all the good things, because more often, I'm not going to say that. That's too general. But like, I just need that story. I need that story of somebody who is nothing like me, but still can embody those qualities that I hold to be like, morally correct and ethically upright.
Yeah, except for we're talking about morally upright. I want to see now that I've been exposed to the original character, I want to see a Professor Xavier who's not morally upright, who is a bit more gray, because I love my Patrick Stewart, Professor X, but you know what? I had him for a good 20 years.
You watch the Umbrella Academy. Worst Professor X ever.
Oh, yes.
Reginald Hargreaves.
100%.
What an awful person. Anyway, I digress. Oh, Aaron says something about Spider-Man. Something Spider-Man. Miles Morales. I fell in love with Miles Morales watching Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. That was so good. That was great.
Somebody said something on Twitter back when that movie came out, and I loved it because it really encapsulated like why that movie was so great. It was like, you get a Spider-Man, you get a Spider-Man, and you get a Spider-Man.
Yeah, but the main Spider-Man was Miles.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, well, is there anything else we should talk about? Any other hero-y type of stuff, or have we sort of reached the end of this?
I mean, we could talk for hours.
We sure could, but like...
But I think we've come to a good spot.
I think so, too. So I will say again to everyone who is here, thanks for joining us for this talk. I had a blast.
Yeah, it was really good.
This type of thing is so right up my alley, where we get philosophical about things and we get to like discuss and like, oh, I think this. Well, I think this. Oh, well, you changed my mind. I eat this up. Couldn't have been happier. Thanks to everybody who joined us in the chat today. There's actually we did good numbers today, y'all. I appreciate it. I saw a few new names today, and I saw a few names that haven't seen in a while, so I'm really excited about that. Again, John, Nessie, what do you guys have coming up? Nessie, you got something this week, or is it maybe next week?
Recording this week. Hopefully, if apocalypse and multiple tropical storms and what have you permit.
Right.
Recording, and it'll be released as a premiere. So everybody gets to enjoy the chat.
And that's a mock trial with...
That's going to be a mock trial with the Learned Hands podcast from the Westerosi Bar Association. And we're going to put on a mock trial for Adolphus Mertry from season 4 of The Expanse.
Oh, but he was a really good guy, wasn't he?
He was a wonderful guy.
And what about you, John? You got something coming up this week?
Yep. Well, in space, no one can hear you scream, but on John Webster Film, you can hear me and Carol Brown talk about the 1979 Ridley Scott classic Alien. So come check us out.
Smooth, John. Smooth.
Yeah. Apocalypse permitting. That's key.
Right. But I really liked your that was well played, sir. A tip of the hat to you. And join us back here next week for Here Be Dragons. We'll be talking about, I don't know, something. But it'll be fun. and we'll have a good time. We'll make a bunch of jokes, and we'll get derailed and probably veer off course, but eventually we'll get back on whatever topic we're talking about. I have no idea what that will be yet, but once I know, I will tweet about it. So to everyone who was here, thanks a lot for joining us. I had a real blast. And for John and Nessie, I will say good night and good luck. It is 2020. Double hurricane is coming. So, be careful out there. But until then, you know what it is. Peace and be excellent to each other.